So Craig Volk is a retired professor of theater at University of Colorado at Denver. I think he's doing lots and lots of writing during his retirement. No more grading, just writing. Right? And so he did do a lot of writing throughout his career, actually. So you may know him as a writer for a season or so of the show Northern Exposure that was on in the 1990s. That was certainly a big part of my life when it was on. And he's also the author of Dust Bowl Book of Days, which he published with us in 2020. Yes, 2020. He's working on other projects he's kind of being secretive about, but I can't wait to see what they are. So tonight we get to hear about Craig's latest book, Dick Termes, Black Hills Artist and Visionary, and I'm going to turn things over to Craig.
Thank you all for coming. I see some familiar faces there, and a lot of people I don't know very well, but some of you I do. I'm going to hold this up just to show you where we are. Right now, we are right in this geodesic dome. This is where Dick and Marky live, a cluster. Is there 7 domes now? How many domes? 7? Mm-hmm. 7 domes in Spearfish, right beside Spearfish Canyon, right over the ridge over there. And Dick and I, we've known each other a long, long time. You know, he used to be, I used to like him because he was pretty. Now I like him because he's an artist. So he and I met like about 50 years ago through the South Dakota Arts Council's what was then called the touring program. He was a visual artist and I was a poet, writing in the poets in the schools program. And forever, I've been watching his work grow and grow and grow. I mean, you see some of the universe of of Dick's work behind me, you know, and there are a lot of those pieces aren't there. In fact, I really encourage you. There's a major show right now in Brookings at the gallery there. It's called Without Beginning or End. It's at the South Dakota Art Museum. It's there until mid-July. It's a really spectacular show. So he has a particular, you know, I call him in the title of the book, Artist and Visionary. You know, visionary is not a word I use very lightly. But I truly believe that Dick is just that. He's explored this unique art form of painting on spheres, breaking out of the framed canvas and creating total environments for all this time since I've known him. He's created over 400 of them. And I felt that, you know, that he wasn't quite getting his due, but also, even though he had shows all over the world and he's taught all over the world, he's also an educator, has taught his entire career as well. And he's done a series of videos that are available on South Dakota Public Television too, if you want to look into those, where he explores what he's doing and also his unique ideas about perspective. And so he also has 2 very unique concepts that are somewhat difficult to explain. They certainly were always difficult for me, and somebody who never got past geometry in high school, you know, who took algebra and geometry, and that was it. I was going no farther in college, and I never did. I went to higher education a long time, never had to take another math class because I avoided them. So what's unique about him is I think he has a really strong visual sense, both from the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of his head, that he sees the world in a way that was unique and distinctive and remains that. So there's 2 kind of guiding principles that I won't go into unless somebody asks a question. They're pretty complex, and I've really tried to make them a bit more simplified for the layman, me being a primary layman, and they have to do with his notion of 6-point perspective. And then what I titled the concavex phenomenon, which is something that happens with these spheres in which an optical illusion happens by viewing the sphere, and where it flips from actually being a concave, I'm still stammering over this after years of work on it, a concave image that's turning clockwise, and it flips to become a convex.
No, the other way around.
That's right. I missed it again. Convex, the cave is the cave, right? So it's a convex a sphere, these spheres are turning, they're convexes in a literal sense, and they're turning clockwise, but it flips and they become a concave, seemingly in your mind, image turning counterclockwise. Did I get it?
Right,
Oh,
absolutely.
man,
Yep.
I still stumble over. So, and the other, recently with the passing of Richard Sierra, the great sculptor, American sculptor, there was a quote from him that I really flagged on with Dick, and also how this fits so well into South Dakota Historical Society Press. That Sierra said, "We evaluate artists by how much they are able to rid themselves of convention to change history." Dick's work does that. I was just showing him a piece. I was 2 years ago in Italy in the Pantheon in Rome, and I walked into the Pantheon, and there's this huge sphere sitting on the ground that's had very sort of basic, primitive breakdowns that Dick has been dealing with in much more complex ways for all this time. So I stand by that he's a visionary. He's a good old boy. We've been parts for a long, long time. So I think what we'll start, and we'll try to do this, my camera work, I actually taught film and television and theater at UCD. My camera work's not very good, so I'm going to be moving the laptop, and I'll try to keep it steady so you guys don't get dizzy. So we can move into these subgenres that I was able to finally get the full breakdown with Dick, and they're in the book as well. The first one is that he deals with, we have a whole first chapter that deal with South Dakota history spheres, and I'll show you one of those, and then
Most of them are out there.
Yeah, they're out in the world in Spearfish and Pier and what other locations in South Dakota? Well, the big one in Brookings.
Heritage Center has a couple.
Yeah.
of them.
Right. We're going to do a thing at the Heritage Center. Now, let me get to the side so I can see it a little bit better.
So this one's kind of fun too
Okay. So let's put it there. We
Okay.
should there. This is if you envision this image as being wrapped around the sphere, is that
Right.
correct, Dick?
Right.
What's the name of
24
this?
scenes of the Black Hills.
And the title is?
Pardon me.
The title is?
At one. Well, it's called, a lot of times we call it the Black Hills Sphere, but at one, because it's the idea of when it's like hunting and fishing, you sort of become at one with the environment. And this is kind of gathering all of those at one moments into one piece. So that's where the at one comes from.
Now, another history one that isn't from South Dakota history, he was pointing this one out. This is one of my favorites too. And the title of this one, Dick, is what? History of Flight? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Dreamers of Flight.
Dreamers of
So
Flight,
this
even
is,
better.
This is all the inventions by man before we figured out how to fly. So there's nothing on here that really worked. But it's the fun part. It's the artist part of flight. Is trying to figure out a lot of Leonardo da Vinci stuff in there. And then just from everywhere, from the kites to a kid flying a kite to jumping off with an umbrella off the railing somewhere, and here they come right here now. And the gods of wind and this actually is the beginning of the helicopter.
Yeah.
By Leonardo came up with he was trying to do the helicopter, he just didn't have the
And there comes Leo himself,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
but
And
it's-
Icarus is down on the below, isn't it? Isn't that
Yep,
Icarus?
he's
falling?
crashed
Yeah, he's
on the
crashed.
bottom,
Yeah,
some down there.
yeah. And then, okay, I'm sorry, I scooped there pretty big. Let's go to one of the other genres. Now we're going to go into some of the subgenres. The first one the subgenre is calculating universes, and that's global peace.
Yep.
And that's
This one.
okay. Explain this about these
Well-
geometric grids, which underlies all of them actually, but
Yeah.
this one, it stands out a bit.
Well, you know, I just started, a lot of times I like to play with three-dimensional geometries because on the flat, it's a whole different set of geometries than when you apply them to the sphere. So a lot of these ideas, I can look through geometry systems on the flat in books. And then I say, well, I wonder what that would look like if it were wrapped around the sphere. And it usually turns into a totally different thing. But this grid was like concentric circles and radiating lines and crisscross. And then what I did was tried to find how many different systems of designs will come out of that problem. And there's just all of these different things. So it was like, you know, just exploring all the varieties of tight fitting, tessellating patterns and all of that. And there's a lot of them. Like this one is a fun one too. To just see that explosion of patterns from triangles, and they go all the way from one side, you know, wrap all the way around to the other side. So there's, you know, and there's tons of these. I mean, I've done enormous. A lot of them are hidden in underneath realism too, where the geometry is there.
And the third one is subconscious universes. And there's one of those is over here above the table, right? This one.
Yeah, and what I do with these is that this plays with the right side of the brain, whereas a lot of my stuff is very left, is very left brain. The math side it comes out of calculations. This is like very loose painting, abstract expressionism. And then I look into it and see what kinds of fantasy images I can find. And I'd like to, a lot of it is not anything you could even name. It's a strange stuff. And I find that it's like your dream world, or looking at clouds and seeing images in the clouds. But what I'm doing here is looking at paint and seeing what I see in the clusters of paint. And I usually just bring enough of it out to where other people can see what I see, because I want to leave room for them to imagine what's here too. So that's one, and we have another one over here that I can kind of turn a little bit. It's called Dripping Dreams. So some of the pieces kind of play with that type of imagery. So and if people ask me to explain it, I can't. I can't
It's a
explain it.
dripping dream.
Yeah, it's just like, it's just how do you explain it, the dreams you have? You know, they don't make sense a lot of times,
Right.
but they're really there. Your brain is finding them. So it's kind of interesting.
And then another subcategory is fantastic 6-point worlds.
Yeah, this is where I use the 6-point perspective, but I make up my own world. And this one is playing off of that pattern there that radiates. What I was doing, you can see there's a basic structure here of a wall, and then I project off of all of these points around to the back side, which repeats itself. And it's sort of an exploration, like in architecture, as to how you can come up with something really, really different. And it just by making that design on one side and projecting it around, all of a sudden it becomes a realistic 3-dimensional world. And so it's just a lot of fantasy thrown into this too.
And then let's do optics of illusion. This is I am a mouth. Is that right? Is that what this one is?
Yeah, this is I am a mouth, and this is a strange one too, but I took a class at University of Wyoming on optical illusions. And so it's actually hunted me ever since, I believe. So lots of this plays with, coming down right here, you can see it. You go from a nose to a mouth, and the mouth becomes an eye for this mouth down here. So all the way up through this, I'm playing with that, where the eye becomes a mouth, the mouth becomes an eye, as it works its way down. And then a lot of playful stuff in it too. There's one over here that's really kind of my newest one, actually.
Yeah, he's made 2 since I last saw it.
Yeah, this one, I call rainbow people, and it's optical illusions, but I'll stop it here a little bit and just, you can see there's white patterns, then the same black pattern, the background become foreground up here, and then it just keeps shifting back and forth. So background and foreground just keep taking each other's place. Like here, the white here becomes another face, and then the black becomes the eye for this guy, and it just keeps really playing a lot.
Talk
And it's
about
also,
color. Talk
well,
about
it's the
why-
rainbow, kind of a rainbow of colors. But what's interesting is,
foreground and background of color.
yeah,
you were explaining.
the color, the background is the opposite side of the color wheel, so it's all complementary colors in it, and it's also it's pointillism.
Pointillism, yes, stipple,
So,
yeah.
and pointillism, the concept of pointillism is that your mind mixes the color. You put the colors down, and your mind knows that if you put red and orange together, you're going to get a red orange. It's just like if you mixed it, but your brain will do that too. And this is George Seurat invented this in 1860s, and it's the beginning of digital photography. That's what, if you analyze digital photography, it's actually this miniaturized very, very small. Those
With
little
pixels.
points, pixels, yeah.
And now let's go to geometry of realism. The one that's the angels. Where is that?
right here.
Oh,
You can see this is, when you first look at this, you just think, can you see it? Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
I can, I got it.
move in a little bit closer. Yeah, you can see it's just all angels, but if you analyze it, it's coming out of pure geometry. The heads of the angels make up pentagons, points of the pentagons, and then the neighboring space is triangles. So it goes triangles, pentagon, triangle, pentagon, triangle, pentagon, triangle, pentagon, all the way through it. So it's actually a little bit like a soccer ball, but a little off. It gets into triangles instead of hexagons. So a lot of my work has in art, we call it substructure. In math, they call it geometry.
yeah. And then famous places. I know you've gone to a number of, what are some of those places that you've gone and done spheres inside of?
Oh, yeah, this one, I'll just so you know when you're looking at it. This is in San Francisco. It's the Grace Cathedral. It's the cathedral you see up on the hill. I spent the winter, we spent 1 month this winter going in San Francisco. I spent 15 days drawing the structure of this cathedral within the cathedral, which was very fun to do. So I got to really experience that. But I've done spheres of famous places like Notre Dame Cathedral, the Paris Opera, the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and Saint-Denis in Paris. And then I went to Istanbul, did Hagia Sophia. We have that over here.
And he did Wrigley Field, one of my favorites, which is a famous.
Yeah,
place.
that's right. We can show that too.
Yeah.
But this is Hagia Sophia, famous building in Istanbul. This started off as a Christian church when the Rome was kind of kicked out of there. It turned into a mosque, but they didn't hurt anything. They just covered it over. So behind these big designs are symbols of Christian symbols that they don't have.
they covered
So they
over.
have to
Yeah.
make sure, but they didn't want to hurt the church, the images, because it's incredible. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And they for a while it was a museum, and they started to show the Byzantine art, and but then I think it's turned back into a mosque again.
Right.
But it goes back and forth. But it's
So they just painted over it, right?
well, they paint over it. They plastered over a lot of it that they could take the plaster back off if they had
Yeah.
to. So it was kind of.
I want to also say for 50 years, I've been asking him to put me on a sphere. Finally, one year I came here and he said, there you are, you're on this sphere. I come back a year later and I say, Dick, where's my sphere? And he says, right there. And I said, well, where did I go? And he said, I painted over you. And I said,
No, you're on the inside.
yeah,
You're
that's what you know.
looking in.
No, what you said was I'm the only person who's inside a sphere. It's not- yeah, right.
Well, here's Wrigley Field. Things you talked about Wrigley Field. This actually is a reproduction of Wrigley Field, but it shows Wrigley Field in the round. So it's you're sitting in the stands and seeing all the people around you and everything above you and the field off in the distance. And then in the field, it shows Babe Ruth, where he was in Wrigley Field, but he was a Yankee when he hit his home run when he was pointing toward the fence and off he goes with the home run. So it became famous. But he's somewhere over here. Here he is pointing right there. Yeah.
I couldn't have been a fan sitting in the
You
stands
could have
here.
been.
Well,
If
yeah.
I had thought about it, you're a Yankee
This
fan.
this is an old
You're a
wound
Yankee
between
fan.
us, just so
can't
you
have a
know.
Yankee sitting in the
Yeah,
stands.
yeah, right. Now, and then the fields and folds. Let's do that. This is fields and folds of transparency and
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, this one plays, when you're playing on a transparent ball, you get to paint on the inside and the outside. And the unique thing that, what I figured out is, that, well, in this case, you can see there's the back of people and the front of people. So I get to have dimension to my people. And, but how I do it is I paint the inside on the outside first. And then I paint over it with a lot of white paint. So it totally disappears. And then I paint what I want on the outside. So at the front of people were painted on first and then over white. And then I painted the back of the people. Then it's so tip it up. So this is called dancing against time. The idea is that if you have friendship and you dance hard, it keeps you from, you get a centrifugal force that leans you out, keeps you from falling into that evil spiral that's trying to suck us in all the time.
I'm hoping I'm getting in the spiral. I
Yeah.
don't know.
As I get older,
My
that
camera
spiral
work.
folds a little
Oh,
harder.
yeah, there it is.
Then there's other transparent ones.
Well, show the new one, don't you? Isn't this one a relatively new one? That's
This is pretty new here, yeah.
yeah.
And what you look at the inside, if you can get into the holes here, you can see that there's an inside in there. And then what I had to do, I painted that, it has sort of realism in it. And then I painted over it white. And then you look at that big white glob and you have to figure out, well, what am I going to do on the outside? And I wanted it to be as good as the inside, and I wanted it to disguise it so that you didn't know that it was coming, the patterns were the same as the inside. So the horse does kind of show up, like right here, you can kind of see that that's a horse. But it's like leaves and weeds that are growing. And so it's kind of fun to take on, to get two different worlds happening in the same space at the same time.
All right, let's sit down. And the other thing about the book I want to mention before I forget, it has an introduction, wonderful introduction by the artist, designer, raconteur, Bill Fleming, and all of the photos that are involved in this wonderful photographer named Bonnie Fleming, who does the photos for the website as well. And just today, I want to mention that she has created, how many are there, 16 of them now? She's turned into virtual reality presentations. So you put on the Oculus goggles and you move around and it's as if you're inside the sphere, seeing it, but you're seeing the total outside, but you're on the inside, which is sort of the way you create them. There's a diagram in the book that sort of explains that. But today we were sitting in the gallery and this woman came in. She was like about 60 years old. I think she never put on these goggles before. She put them on and was watching the sphere, and she was just cackling and giggling and oohing and awing. I mean, to the two younger women that were with her, probably teenagers, she wouldn't get out of the seat until she watched all 16 of the spheres.
I had
in virtual reality.
Somebody else might want.
Right. But anyway, so how are we doing time-wise? Yeah, we're about almost a half an hour. So we're open to questions. We can certainly talk more and show more. There's
a lot more we can show.
Yep. So questions?
I didn't see where there was a place to write the question.
Oh, so you're just gonna talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Craig's
You're
brother,
supposed-
David, so we'll give him a
Right,
pass.
let him talk. Let my big brother talk or he'll beat me up.
That's right. And
Put a pillow over my face until my legs stop kicking.
in fact, your organization published 4 books for me.
Yes.
Back when Nancy was running the show. So my question is, what is the material that the spheres are made out of? Number one. And number two, do you just freehand paint on those, or do you have mats, or I mean, how do you don't actually paint with a brush and paint. You must.
Yeah, he does. Well, the balls are made out of polyethylene plastic, which is they would be a light fixture. They might hang from your ceiling with a light bulb inside of them. But I get to the factory before they drill a big light bulb hole. So I only have a small sprue hole. Then that's where my chain goes in and a post to keep it from slipping out. So that most of them are polyethylene, but some of the transparent ones are acrylic. In order to get a good transparent ball, you have to switch to acrylic. Yeah, and what was the other question? Oh, how I paint.
How do you paint?
I use very primitive tools like you can use a ruler on a sphere if it's a flexible, like a poster board ruler. It isn't really a ruler, it's just a piece of tape that I tape on one vanishing point, will stretch it over to another vanishing point, and that way I can get nice straight lines so that things are not all of a sudden you're way off kilter. So I start with a point system of the 6 points of perspective when I'm doing the perspective stuff. And then sometimes I actually use shingle nails, and I tape a shingle nails on each of the points. And then I have a piece of tape that has a hole snipped out of it, so I can just put that hole over the nail, and then I can swivel the tape or anywhere I want around the whole ball. Especially the big spheres. I can't be like, I did a 7.5 foot one. You can't be putting a piece of tape trying to hold it in place and it falls off. And so I've realized this shingle nail idea worked really, really well. So I mean, it's really primitive, but it's the way I do it. And then it's all hand painted. Yeah.
I'll be darned. I mean, to do that kind of intricacy, I mean, on a canvas would be one thing, but to have that perspective and be able to figure out here's where this is going and stuff, it's incredible.
So we've got some good questions lined up here.
Okay,
so I'm going to back us up a little bit, and there's a great discussion in the book about this, but what were your influences, Dick? And I know so Curtis is asking, were you influenced by Picasso, the Surrealists, Buckminster Fuller, psychedelics, or who? You mentioned Seurat, I think mirror balls. Love your work. Thanks. I'll live up.
Yeah. You know, I mean, a lot of my influences are not necessarily artists. I mean, I love the theory of a lot of scientists, the Einstein, those guys too, you know, the kinds of philosophy they have. It gets embedded in you too. But Bucky Fuller, for sure, we live in his domes now. We have 7 of them here that we live in. So I actually met him at Black Hills State. I got to pick him up at the airport and transport him because I was the only one, I think, that knew who he was at the time. But he was very well known. And so he's big time with me. Escher, I learned about Escher after I had about 3 or 4 years of painting on spheres. Everybody kept saying, "Oh, you must really like Escher." And I finally thought, I better study this guy and see who he is. And then I realized, yeah, I really like Escher. And I actually met his oldest son, came to our place 2 different times because, you know, the little ball that Escher holds, that reflected ball, and he did a lithograph of that. That piece I actually did a sphere of, and I sent a video to one of the guys that wrote the best book on Escher was Bruno Ernst in the Netherlands, and he gave me named when I wrote to him, he gave me names of all kinds of people that I should get in touch with.
And his oldest son, George Escher, was in Nova Scotia. And I sent him a video of this, thinking that I'm either going to get sued by him or hopefully make a friend. I made a friend with him. And he ended up getting me when MC Escher turned 100 years old. I got to go to Italy and be part of his show. I got to show with him with about 4 pieces. So that was like one of the biggest things that ever happened to me. But by then, of course, he'd been dead for 25 years, but he was big time in Italy as well. He's Dutch, but he spent most of his time in Italy till Mussolini came along. And then that's what George, his oldest son, said. They were turning George into a little Nazi or whatever. Yeah. And that's when his dad said, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So that's when they moved to Switzerland, I think it was.
Right.
So a long, sorry for a short question.
And there's information about this and Escher's son and quote, I won't now, in the book too. That explains all that too.
Yeah.
So Evelyn wants to know what led you to create the spheres, and she also says magnificent works of art. So you're getting lots of compliments here. But yeah, what led you to the spheres?
You know, it was trying to get a larger picture. Most artists with the canvas, there's an end to the canvas. And so you only get so much of the world that you're in. And I kept wanting, to start with, I was doing panoramics. And I was actually taking photographs and sticking them onto the flat surface. And then I'd fill in between and making pictures that way. And I realized now, as I look back, I wanted the whole scene. When you go into the Grace Cathedral that we showed you pictures of and take pictures of it, and you get home, you go, oh, wow, this doesn't give me the feeling that I had when I was in there. You experience all those stained glass tile down below, and all of that is your experience. And that's what I wanted to get. How do you get all of that whole picture around you? And the sphere is the only answer to that. A polyhedron, you can do it on but they have edges that you have to deal with. So I've done a few of those, 2 different polyhedron structures, but the sphere is a nice smooth canvas that, you know, if you put it on your head and imagine copying everything from inside that transparent ball that's around you, that's basically what I do, you know.
Total environments is what he calls it. Yeah.
So kind of going off of that, when we were talking about Escher, so Ellen is asking, and I'm not sure which piece she's talking about. She noticed an Escher-like piece and wanted to know if it's an octahedron. Octahedron? How do you say that?
Octahedron?
Yeah.
Is it?
But the octahedron is
sure.
point perspective. You know, that I have painted on octahedrons. I don't think I have one in here. I have a couple tetrahedrons that are in the gallery that I painted, like in the when I approach the polyhedron, I bring my 6-point perspective to it and say, how do the 6 points fit on this that makes it solidly fitting with its geometry? And every one of the platonic solids have a place where you can find 6 equal distant points that fit with their geometry. So that's what I was doing. I was trying to do a 6-point perspective total environment on each of the different polyhedron, if that's sort of close to the answer.
It was interesting. Again, when I was in Italy, there happened to be an exhibit of Escher, and one of the ways in which they were explaining Escher outside was they had a huge mirrored ball, and you walked up to that ball, and it's like what these are, except, you know, it was just reflecting that, again, that total environment. It's fascinating.
Yep. Yeah, if you could just freeze a reflective ball, it would be very similar to what I do. Except, you know, I told George Escher that, and he said, I think you're missing out on something. He says, my dad told me that when you look at a mirrored ball, why he was fascinated with it is even if you just look at the front of it, you're getting everything except what's blocked out by the sphere itself. But it's very, very warped on the edges. So when I did his sphere and did it on a big and equalized all that distortion out around the sphere, there was just a tiny little bit that he wasn't getting on his flat piece that I get on the whole sphere. And I just made up what I was missing. And George said, I think you did it pretty close. That was kind of, said, I'm very pleased with that reflected ball that he said, you know, when I got done, I realized there's no door for him to get into his studio. How's he get in his studio? And George said, well, you evidently knew. I said, no, I really didn't. But he said, it's a trap door. That rug that's on the floor, you actually lift that rug up and there's a trap door that you go downstairs to get. He was in an attic when he did that reflective ball sphere. Yeah. That's, you know, I've never heard anybody say that, but, and I just thought, well, okay, I don't have a door. It's so much like Escher, you know, you can't even get into the studio. So I was just being funny about it. And he said that you're actually accurate with it.
Yes,
That's
so
one of the.
your place though has a door, I remember.
Yes,
I
it
remember
does.
your place has a door. Your gallery has a door. You put that in there.
Yeah.
So Craig, there's Patrick O'Leary wants you to know that the Yankees are up 3-1, top of the third, but that was a little while ago.
Good,
That was 10 minutes
by that
ago.
all-
10 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
Craig, what was your favorite part of writing this book?
Well, I think it was, you know, I mean, obviously I've been here since there was one dome and it was built, and we've remained, you know, close friends over the years. And I wanted to understand it in a way that I could hopefully articulate it, you know. And Slater was really helpful with that. That one of the chapters, he said, you know, this doesn't, I don't understand this. And I said, oh, I probably don't either. And he wanted to rewrite. So I rewrote it and worked on that. Thank you, Slater. And you know, as I said earlier, it's not easy to articulate what he's about. And when you get it, I mean, when you sit him and Bill Fleming down, which I did, I wanted to just hear them as well talk about this, because Bill explores some very similar things. And as I say, I think the day's going to come when, you know, you're going to talk about my Corn Palace, the Corn Palace, and more and Crazy Horse and Termes's gallery. I do. I mean, I told him my goal is that we're going to make you so well known they're going to change Christensen Road to Termes Road out here that goes by the house.
My mother was a Christensen.
Oh, so it's close enough.
Yeah.
But you can do a Christensen Termes Road.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
true.
Yes.
Right. We talk about his grandma in the book too. There's a bio section as well.
It's fun when he asked me a little bit, how do we simplify this perspective stuff down? So I actually told him this story too, which I don't remember if it got in the book or not. But I said, so you walk out and you're standing in the middle of a railroad track and you're out in eastern South Dakota and it goes off to infinity in front of you. It goes to a point. And then you turn around and notice those two parallel lines that go to a point out in front of you come out and they go to a point behind you too,
Right.
if you turn around and look at it. And then a road's crossing that. You know, there's a little dirt road that goes off to infinity to the east. It also goes off to infinity to the west. That's 4-point perspective. Now, if you just put a bunch of buildings by it and big skyscrapers and all of that, they run to the same 4 vanishing points because they're all parallel to the railroad track. And then the up and down lines are telephone poles that are running up and down. If you look at them closely, they vanish straight above your head, all the poles around you, and straight below your feet. So that's your 5 and 6 point perspective. That's all there is to it.
It's not in the book. And the reason is I can never understand the one going this way. It's dirt. It's not.
Well,
But you
if you project it on a sphere,
you're right.
you have to go right through the dirt.
You'd have to go through the dirt, but see, that's a stopping point. I get all the other 5. I still think I explained it better.
Yeah, you did good. I think you did.
There's some diagrams that help. The book has diagrams.
There's actually I had him do this little drawing of how he paints it from being inside. Then I really got it then. that illustrates how he creates it, but the dirt always stops.
The dirt, well,
Dirt stops.
project yourself up higher. You can project yourself anywhere. And
Well, then I'm the focal point. I'm up here like an angel.
You could be an angel.
Well, they're
Angels understand 6-point perspective.
They probably do. 6-point perspective is obviously angelic in his mind.
And that's how the angel sphere was made, right?
There is that one.
That's right.
Now I get it. Yeah.
So, Dick, do you have a favorite? I know it's like picking out one of your children, right? Like, which was the favorite, or a certain genre that you like to gravitate toward?
You
than
know,
some
the
others, or-
one I used to take, like, when Leonardo took trips, he always packed up the Mona Lisa with him. And he took that along with him because it's a small little, if you've ever seen it, it isn't very big, but it shows his skills, And what I used to pack with me all the time when I took these Europe trips and stuff was the Pantheon in Rome. It was a small sphere, and it actually captures everything that you see inside the Pantheon. And that was like my jam. I also like Saint-Denis, a cathedral in northern Paris, too, is a smaller one. So that's one I take along with me. But those both show the perspective really well.
Yeah, they do. Architecture really does it.
Yeah. I always tell people when they ask that question, there's about 6 different things I think about. I like the surreal worlds. I like the geometry worlds. So each one of those have different things. I like the optical illusion worlds. I studied all that. That's the trouble. I got way too much education. I ended up with my master's and an MFA, and then the college gave me a doctorate. So I think I have all the degrees you can have. But what happens is you learn all these schools of art, and I loved them all. I mean, I was fascinated by everything that artists have done over the 2,000 years. I love the cave paintings as well as I like Picasso. However, I think they were just as good as any of us, even back in those days. I have to tell this little story about my thesis at University of Wyoming. One of my professors talked me into this thesis, and it was the idea that that art has grown, that modern arts are above the other arts, and as we developed as mankind, our art form has developed. And I got halfway through the thesis, and I said, I don't believe this. How am I going to get my degree? I don't believe what I wrote. Because I think cave people were just as skillful as I am, and I've had all this education. They just had a sense toward the arts, but I think it's individual, what the individual does with their life and what they are fascinated with, and does it attract people? Does it educate other people to something in the visual world? That's what it's all about. And I think all of those different artists are equal in my mind. They just are opening up a different thing of worm, can of worms or whatever, and showing people a different way to see the world. And that's what I really try and focus on. I want to show people a different way of seeing. I want them they have a neck. You can turn the neck and see the whole visual world around you, almost. I can't anymore, but
that's owlish.
Huh?
That's owlish. That's very
Yeah, an owl really sees the world. Yeah. But anyway, that's my thesis was kind of like I had to go and defend my thesis too. And thank goodness that other professor was in there defending his ideas that he fed to me while I went that direction to start with,
So
I was going to ask if you abandoned it.
But Otis is, I discovered the concept of Wyoming.
You did, and then you went to Otis,
then went to Otis and had 2 years of free time to figure it out, Yeah.
We've got a couple of more how-to questions. So how long does it take to create the spheres, and what kind of paints do you use?
I use acrylics. I was an oil painter before I hit on the sphere, and I did my first one in oils, and it took forever just to turn the ball because it was wet. and it would smear up the ball. So I thought, oh, this isn't gonna work. So I switched to acrylic because 10 minutes it can be dry, or a hair dryer will dry it up really fast. And that's, yeah. What was the other half?
How long for the larger spheres? How long does that take you?
Oh, how long?
Depends on
Yeah,
the
they
size,
can,
right?
they can go from, 2 weeks to 5 months, 6 months. Well, the big one I did was 9 months. The 7.5 foot one was 9 months of time. I spent 3 months on the outside drawing it with wipe offable ink. And then I crawled inside the ball and painted for 6 months inside of it. And then I came back and erased the lines on the outside. So the paint had to hold up by itself, the lines of it. So, but most of them are like 3-4 months, I'd say. Like the cathedral, I think I put about 3.5 months in that.
The recent cathedral, the one in California.
Yeah, the one in
The
California.
Grace
there.
Cathedral in San Francisco. So where is this really large 7.5 foot one? Where does
It's
that
at
one live?
Douglas, Wyoming, in the law enforcement academy over there. It's in an inside courtyard, but it was done back in '84. That's a long time ago.
Yes.
And it's the sun's beating it up pretty good. So
Mm.
it's not great a shape as it was when I first did it, of course. But it had to be helicoptered into the site. It was that big of a ball. It wouldn't go through any of the windows and doors. So I had to hire a helicopter to bring it up and bring it down inside. So it was a pretty wild experience. And then it
So you
took off.
decided not to do any more like that. That was it.
Well,
that size, right?
I felt like I think a woman that's having a child after 9 months of holding that child inside you, and then all of a sudden somebody takes off with your child.
Airborne.
Yeah, and I thought, man, I hope this guy knows how to fly that helicopter. And he was beautiful. He did a great job. Just laid it down just softly.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Neat.
cool. Very fun.
So you've gotten the audience thinking about this 6-point perspective and different ways to explain it. So Eric and Ruth Raveling say, okay, you could maybe explain it from the perspective of a window washer halfway up a skyscraper. Half the building recedes away below him or her, and half of it recedes away above.
That's a good point. That gets your up and down points. And then if there's a whole row of windows going off, you could get an east-west points. But then you have to go in and out. Then you don't have, if you're looking right into the
Windows
building,
open.
see going in front of you. If you look through the window, yeah, you could get your points inside the window. Looking through it, you could get, and then behind you, or behind the window, behind you when you're painting or cleaning the window, you'd get a point back behind your head. So anyway, you can actually find, what for a while, I thought the points maybe moved, but they don't. The points are part of you. And it's cubicle worlds. I have to make sure that's what I'm talking about is skyscrapers, buildings, cathedrals are all cubicle structures. And any cube has 6 directions to it: north, south, east, west, up, and down. And whether you're in a fancy cathedral, it's still basically those 6 points. Everything projects to those 6 points, and that's the miraculous. That's what gets the math people kind of excited about my work.
My kind of connection point to that was in the quotes in the book. Black Elk had this great quote where when he would go up on top of, it was Harney Peak then, Black Elk's Peak, he would say that Black Elk's Peak is the center of the world. And then he said, but anywhere is the center of the world.
Exactly.
Meaning that you're that focal point, you're that turn that goes what I call zenith and nadir, north, south, east, and west. Then I got it. I started to understand it in terms of a different, concept of a more organic way of looking at what he's talking about. I still don't fully get it, but I've tried. It's the best I can do.
The book does seem like you get it. So the beauty of writing. I think that's a great place.
We sat downstairs and I read it to him and I thought, oh boy, this is risky. I read the whole thing and it was mostly what it was.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's very nice. It's lovely.
Yeah, the press did such a great job with all the visuals, I got markers in here, but all
Also,
those.
I want to shout out to the book designer, Rich Hindle is on. So
Oh,
created
good.
the
Yes,
cover and put it all
All right.
together and really enjoyed working on this.
yes.
So he
That's
told
cool.
me.
Job.
Little
Met
shout
Rich.
out there.
Hello. Thank you.
And any final thoughts as we're wrapping up here about
Deidre, do you
the
see that
spheres?
someone asking where to purchase the book? You want to share that?
Oh, I did not see that. I am sorry. And oh, I stopped scrolling. Okay. All right. Okay, so one question here from the lovely Lauren Forsch. I'm wondering, Craig, how when you were writing the book about someone with so much education, experience, and recognition, how do you decide what to include and what to leave out? That is a great question.
Yeah, it sort of had its own structure, its own kind of innate structure in terms of breaking the subgenres down and then explaining those two concepts that I talked about before. And I wanted to do it, in a kind of a traditional, coffee table kind of book that, a biography that made him personal as well, so that you understood him as a person who grew up near Spearfish, South Dakota, and what his parents were like and how he was connected to that. So the structure wasn't that difficult to attain. I have my own theories about dramatic structure that I've worked on and taught for years and years and years. And I applied it to here as well, to what I think an ending is to any literary piece of a screenplay, a teleplay, a stage play, whatever it is. And also nonfiction or biography, same kind of system. So I use that with this to practice what I preach to my students for all those years. And
that sounds like a great conclusion. Okay, to buy the book, you can go to our website, which is sdhspress.com. So SDHS as in South Dakota Historical Society Press.com, or Dick's got some in the gallery if you're in Spearfish in there. All right, so as we wind down here, I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for History Talks and giving up a little of your time. And Craig has something to say.
Yeah, I just likewise thanks everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces there, pals and relatives, and I appreciate it.